Hello, my name is Russell Myers, independent for U.S. President for 2024. So there has been discussion on Capitol Hill about, declaring Russia a state sponsor of terrorism. Secretary of State Blinken has largely declined to enact this declaration so far. However, Nancy Pelosi is now stating that if he does not issue the declaration, Congress will. This is an extremely dangerous proposal on many levels, and in no way should this happen. Russia has clearly stated that if this happens, they will sever any and all diplomatic ties with the United States. I have pointed out many times that wars are not prevented or ended by any means which do not include diplomacy. The U.S. has already coerced Europe into plans to cease imports of all oil and gas from Russia. This has not yet been fully implemented, and some EU nations have obtained exceptions due to the fact that they are land-bound and obtain as much as 85% of their gas supplies from Russia. All of Europe, as a result of this, is suffering the worst inflation they have seen since the early 1970s or longer. People are in fear of having no heat for the winter. Entire industries are shutting down, driving up unemployment to crisis levels. The UK expects utility bills averaging roughly $600 a month this winter, may be higher. I have heard Scottish citizens have already been burdened with utility bills exceeding an average of $700 a month for a number of months, which will only increase. If this passes, what would follow would be that any country still trading with Russia would also be declared a sponsor of terrorism and subjected to largely the same treatment as Russia. This poses definite problems. India, China, South Africa, most South American countries, in fact, most countries have refused to abide by the U.S.-led trade sanctions against Russia, for good reason. These countries do not only rely on fossil fuels from Russia. Russia remains the largest grain exporter in the world. While grain exports from Russia and Ukraine were suspended, there was immense fear of global famine. Russia also exports fertilizer, weapons, cheese, and other goods. Because Russia exports so much fertilizer, the suspension of fertilizer exports from Russia has led to as much as a 300% increase in fertilizer prices, which resulted in many farmers reducing fertilizer use, which has reduced crop yields significantly. A number of countries are concurrently experiencing drought, so they rely more heavily on the remaining viable farmland in addition to food imports from Russia. Many countries also export to Russia. The European Union increased exports to Russia by 18% in July, limited by specific items which are still sanctioned. To cut off trade with Russia will destroy entire nations' economies for decades. This is not a situation where the U.S. suddenly changes its mind, lifts this declaration, and everything returns to normal. This would have permanent repercussions globally. Up to this point, I have only focused on Russia, but Russia is not the only issue at play here. This past weekend, another U.S. congressional delegation visited Taiwan without permission from Beijing. This is after Nancy Pelosi caused an extreme uproar by visiting Taiwan 2 weeks ago. The claim involves securing access to Taiwanese microchips. In response to her visit, China ceased exporting natural sand to Taiwan, which is critical to producing microchips. Between mainland China and Taiwan, part of China, China produces 45% of the world's microchips. Thus, we can expect that all exports of microchips to the U.S. have been or will be suspended indefinitely. No matter how much money the U.S. throws at increasing domestic microchip production, it still takes 5 to 8 years to establish a functional microchip foundry. I have still not arrived at my main point here. On my channel Issues Unite, for years I have been warning about the dangers of censorship. To now, both left and right content producers have been demonetized and deplatformed. Entire platforms have been taken down. My warning has been that it will not end there. Now, here we are. The U.S. Secretary General said days ago that no citizen has the right to question the actions of the FBI. This includes journalists. What do we call a government which cannot be questioned? The domestic effect of declaring Russia or any other country to be a terrorist sponsor, or a terrorist state or sponsor of terrorism, would be that there is the extreme likelihood that anyone, including a presidential candidate, that opposes any such actions against these nations would also be declared a terrorist sympathizer. None of that means you would have to be a supporter of Russia, China, whoever. Opposing these actions based on humanitarian concerns would do it. Just sharing a meme to oppose these things would be enough. In short, your First Amendment rights no longer exist. Keep in mind that we no longer have habeas corpus in this country. That right has not been restored since Obama suspended that right, which means the government has the legal right to pick up any citizen at any time from any place without charge, without the right to a lawyer, without the right to a hearing or trial, and remain in detention indefinitely. They do not have to notify your family, friends, the media, or anyone else of your detention, location, or condition. Of course, they may also detain your family or anyone you socialize with. You could also be extradited to another country, where our government still utilizes torture methods even now. Maybe you think this is an extreme view. If you are old enough, would you have believed the U.S. would sanction the use of torture before 2001? In the early 20th century, the Wilson administration enacted laws which made it a criminal act to verbally oppose U.S. involvement in World War I. Highly popular socialist presidential candidate Eugene V. Debs was imprisoned for speaking out against that war. Newspapers and journals were raided, shut down, and journalists imprisoned. In the 1950s, we had McCarthyism, where many thousands of American citizens were exiled, deported to countries they had never been, imprisoned, and even executed. Simply put, my views are not extreme. There is very strong historical and current precedent for my views. On July 29th, the African People's Socialist Parties in St. Louis, Missouri, and St. Petersburg, Florida, were raided by the FBI. The home of the party chairman and his wife were arrested, but then released after being handcuffed and forced to sit on the curb for hours. The FBI accuses the organization of having ties to the Kremlin. This organization has been in existence in the United States since 1972. There was no evidence for these claims. This happened because of their anti-capitalist political and economic views. All of this is an illustration of why I have the absolute dedication to diplomacy. It's not all about playing nice with other countries. It is about human lives, human and civil rights, not only in other countries, but in this country. U.S. foreign policy has many impacts on your own life, your own rights. These impacts may not be clearly evident until it is too late and those rights have been taken away from you. Our government has taken more and more of your rights over the past 20 years, beginning with the Patriot Act, which I would rescind. It continued on with mass surveillance, warrantless mass surveillance of U.S. citizens, which continues to this moment. On that, I would require specific warrants for surveillance. Our government collaborates with corporate media, retailers, and social media to monitor and report your actions and censor your speech, even when it is not in any way involved in the incitement to violence. Last year, you could be silenced for questioning the efficacy of vaccines or believing that our government did questionable research in other countries, which has now been proven to be true. Love him or hate him, but the last president of the United States was removed from social media at the behest of the opposing political party. U.S. foreign policy and U.S. domestic policy are intricately tied. In some cases, actions are tested in other countries before being implemented here. In other cases, foreign policy is used as justification for domestic policy and the denial of your rights as a U.S. citizen. This has reached an extreme which will continue getting worse unless we, as a nation, stand up and oppose these infringements on our liberties. The time is now. We cannot wait any longer. Both major parties take turns depriving you of your freedoms in every way possible. It is my goal to restore your rights in these conflicts, which we pay for in too many ways to count. Join me in this fight. Stand up for your rights, for your children's rights. Do not sit quietly and wring your hands. Speak out loudly, because silence is consent. Share this article or video. Talk about these subjects widely while you still can. Help draw visibility to this campaign, because that helps. If you can, please donate whatever you can to help expand this campaign. It is a fact of our current system that a political campaign does need money, something I hate but must deal with. Thank you for watching. I hope you have a good day.